Welcome to Video Games Weekly. I am Paul Charchian. My co-host is Reiner from Game Informer and GameInformer.com. And Reiner, we've got some big Game Informer news.
Yeah, not only did we just launch our new magazine, which has Cyberpunk 2077 on the cover, with a bit of surprise for people who get it in the mail. If you get it digitally, you won't see this, but there's a special added bonus. If you get it in your mailbox, should be coming over the next couple weeks.
I get a copy of the game?
No. Nothing like the old Nintendo Power Days where they'd give you a copy of Dragon Warrior. I already had Dragon Warrior, by the way, Charge, and I ended up trying to sell it to Funko Land, thinking I could buy another game. They wanted to give me $1 for it.
Okay.
Everybody got it.
I bet. A lot to get to. You mentioned Cyberpunk 2077. We'll spend plenty of time on that, but I think what we really ought to do is spend most of the rest of the show on Divinity Original Sin 2 coming to iPad. I'm very excited for this.
Yeah, I thought we were done with Switch. I thought that would be the last time
the last thing you can port it to.
This game.
So I own it on PC, PS4, Switch. I may have to buy Divinity Original Sin 2 for the 4th time.
Do you just walk around with your iPad like outside of the house, or
I don't, but it's in bed. That's the thing that I sort of wind down with, right? Crawl into bed, get out my iPad, and I'm on my iPad for the last 30, 40 minutes before I fall asleep. I would like to spend that time with you do Divinity Original Sin.
That is the laziest response I've ever heard, because you could put your iPad down and just pick up your Switch in the same amount of time it probably takes to like close down an app and open a new one.
That's probably true.
Maybe you're saving. You might be saving a couple seconds.
Here's why I don't switch in bed. The buttons are clicky, and my wife is trying to sleep right next to me. So the buttons are click, 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 and she's trying to sleep right there. So that's why.
I think you just got to like go all the way under the covers. You know?
Like when we used to read in secret with a flashlight under the covers.
Exactly. I used to play my Game Boy that way. They weren't backlit, so you.
That's right. You had to have a light source. You've got a great game system when people have to hold a flashlight in their mouth and shine it at your game system in order to play it.
Yeah. Oh man, we've come a long way.
We really have.
Long way.
Anyway, Divinity Original Sin 2 coming to iPad. It's going to be great, and I'm excited for more people to have the opportunity to play one of the great role-playing games of all time. Speaking of great role-playing games of all time, Cyberpunk 2077 appears to be headed that way. This is I think this is as big a launch for a role-playing game as ever.
Yes.
Skyrim was really, really anticipated. Is there another one that I might be missing?
No, because you'd say The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which came before Cyberpunk, same dev team, but that's the game that really put
them on the
map.
That's right.
It was building momentum. It was the third entry in a series that was beloved by people, but not to the degree of it being kind of mass market, right?
Yeah.
So no, I think you're right. I think this is the biggest RPG event, maybe next to a Final Fantasy back in the day. Final Fantasy VIII, right? Coming off of Final Fantasy VII.
Maybe.
That was a huge deal.
I don't think it was as big as this. I mean, and part of it is because Cyberpunk 2077, Reiner, it's not just a role-playing game. I mean, it's not like a JRPG, which has got a much narrower audience. This is good. Cyberpunk's going to draw in fans who just like action games and fans who just like shooters. And it's going to, the appeal, the base for the appeal is gigantic, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's also something to the cadence of game releases now. Back in the day, you'd get them yearly. They'd pump out Final Fantasy VII a year, or 2 years later, you'd get Final Fantasy VIII, and then a year later, Final Fantasy IX. Now, we played Witcher Wild Hunt. How long ago? That was
5 years?
5-6 years ago. So,
yeah.
People are eager to see what this team has done next, how they've evolved the RPG genre again.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes more of an event than just kind of a yearly release, right? Like they really kind of build this up, and even the delays, I would say, help it. I think every time they dangle that carrot in front of us and it gets pulled back one step further, the excitement builds more, right? Like it's like, I just need to get that game now.
Yeah.
And it's almost here, right? Like we're just a few months away, I guess November now, right? So in the heart of the holiday season, this is the game. When we have new consoles coming out, I think people will be talking about Cyberpunk 2077 instead.
I think you're right about that. Game Informer had 3 people spend 4 hours with Cyberpunk 2077. So
Yes.
you've had people with real legitimate hands-on time. In 4 hours is a fraction of the full playing time of this game. I mean, it sounds like it's going to be a easily into the 100-hour range for this game, and probably much more than that if you want it to. But the fact that you got a total of 12 hours into the game between 3 people it really does give you a real sense of what it's about. And I'm excited to hear what your team came away with from impressions of their time with Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah, well, just on the surface, they loved what they played. That was kind of the general sentiment, that it's very cool, very ambitious, and just beautiful. Like, just going out in Night City is just every time kind of awe-inspiring, right? Like, just the amount of detail that is there. So that's kind of the general just takeaway. The thing that should get people excited. And it's if you're into RPGs for depth, this game has it as well. They have not like really stripped away anything by going to first person, having it be more of a shooter. There are deep back end systems for upgrading your character, different skill paths you can go on, just in customization too. Like in The Witcher, you're Geralt, and that's it. This game, you make your own character named V, and you get to customize them down to every part of the body. And I mean every part of the body.
I've never played a game in which you can customize the pubic hair.
Yeah. It's there.
Okay. All right. So clearly is this game going to set a high watermark for nudity and sex?
I don't know.
I mean, they're not going to have me customize my genitals if I'm not going to use them, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that means. It's just that level of detail they're going for. This is your character. Customize it completely and go out into this, cyberpunk world and see what happens.
Are you going to go full Manscaped?
I don't know. I haven't given it any thought yet.
All right, you have till November to sort that out.
I'm just gonna randomize, and see what happens later.
Okay. All right, that works. Okay, so what do we learn from all the time with the game? There's several really good articles at GameInformer.com, and of course, you mentioned the print edition is going to have tons of content as well. How many pages is this next print edition devoted to Cyberpunk?
We have 14 pages of details. We got some exclusive stuff in there that you can't find online. And it's an even deeper dive than we already have some big, meaty articles online. And yeah, we're going super deep on this one.
So Witcher 3, as a base point, was mind-bogglingly huge, to the point that while I was playing it, I felt like it was almost too big. And I felt like I was almost an insignificant speck in this gigantic world. This world appears to be even larger, if possible, if that could be the case, and just filled with content. Give people a sense of scope and size in Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah, so it's a kind of a metropolis, right? Like you're going into a city more like Grand Theft Auto 4, when you went into Liberty City. This is a thriving place, buildings everywhere. A lot of them you can interact with and go inside of, and there might be quests that you could pick up in there. Just wandering, you're going to run into a lot more stuff than you would in The Witcher, because there's more density. And what that means is kind of like New York. Everybody's kind of packed in tightly. And, it's not like a sprawling field where you see one house. It's everywhere you look. There's things to do, people to talk to. So right there, just as you step outside of your apartment, you're going to be overwhelmed. And I think that's something like, if you just want to see side content, you're going to have more than you ever knew what to do with, is kind of the sound of things. It
reminds me of Blade Runner in many ways. But, if you think of the movie Blade Runner, every time Harrison Ford got off into the streets to go, anywhere, do anything, and he's in the city, it's always filled with people. It's always bustling. And this has been one of my biggest gripes of all of video games, has been they will drop me into what is supposed to be a thriving urban scene, and there's 7 people on the street. I want it to be like, I want it to be like downtown New York. I want it to be elbow to elbow. I want there to be a ton of people. And I want to believe that we now have the hardware that can push that kind of realism. And I think we haven't had it in the past because of hardware limitations. and because it's just hard to navigate a busy city with yourself, but I want it to be brimming with people.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they have here. And if you like Witcher 3 for its quests, I think, Chart, you agree that
Oh God,
The Witcher 3 innovated and is still the best RPG in terms of how quests unfold.
yes.
Some could go for like 8 hours. One quest could go for like 8 hours and be its own standalone game almost, right?
Yes.
Like standalone story.
There was a three hags mission in Witcher 3 that it started as this innocuous side quest that you think is going to be, I'm going to wrap this up in 45 minutes. Oh no. The next thing you know, as you mentioned, you're 8 hours into this bonkers epic story that's better than the full storyline of a lot of games that we've played. And that is I think part of the excitement as well for Cyberpunk is just the quality of the story writing was so strong in Witcher 3 that people expect similar things in this one.
Yeah, and Matt Miller, who did one of the previews for Game Informer, he has a line in his preview, and this should excite Witcher fans right out of the gates. He says, the pickup mission turns out to be a multi-layered and multi-part adventure in its own right.
Wow.
That right there sounds exactly what you would expect from CD Projekt Red, the developer, in terms of delivering what you remember from Witcher and maybe, upping it a little bit and turning it into multi-layered, and that means you have a lot of agency in what you're doing, a lot of ownership over your actions and how it unfolds. There's going to be a lot of different outcomes, different characters you can interact with. Even Keanu Reeves, right, who's a big player in this game, he can be an ally or an enemy of yours, depending on how your hand is dealt and how you handle it.
I think most people are going to want Keanu Reeves on their side. I don't. That's my hunch. And so it'll be tempting to flip it over just to try to play the other side of it.
Yeah, you have to wonder if the narrative's going to try to tip you
Lean
in the other direction.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Well, maybe he's not a good guy.
Yeah.
You never know. You never know how that's going to play out.
All right. Also at GameInformer.com, we're talking about the Cyberpunk 2077 key takeaways, the massive level of character customization. Now, character customization to me has always been a mixed bag. I spent all this time in Skyrim as one example, building my character and what he looks like and everything else. And then I played in first person and never saw him again. So a lot of times it's felt like really a waste of time to put any effort into character customization. So I know there's a lot of it. And I think the payoff needs to be there so that at least I see myself once in a while.
Yeah, we kind of joked about the depth of cosmetic customization. But there's also, you really get into your character's head a little bit, which is something you don't often see in character customizing. This one, you pick their life paths. There's going to be 3 different life paths that kind of determine their origin story, so to speak. And that will have an effect on certain characters in the game, right? So if you have something in your life path, another character you run into, that may conflict with them, right? And you might have beef right out of the gates, or maybe they come to your aid when you need them. It's such a cool little idea, but you have to think that's the depth they're going with in this game. All the threads, the narrative threads that they have, it just has to be such a monumental undertaking to execute that. And maybe why we're starting to see some delays, right? Like as they're kind of play testing this over and over, maybe they're finding some things aren't lining up and they got to tweak them before launch.
That could be. There's when you mentioned the life paths, there's 3 different life paths that you start the game choosing between: Nomad, Corpo, or Street Kid. And that determines what part of the world you're going to start in and what your initial mission is going to be. If I've read Kim's article correctly, the Nomad, you start in like dusty wasteland, not in an urban environment at all, and you're a traveler going through a desert area. Corpo is some kind of a corporate setting, and Street Kid is obviously a city kid on the streets who's got all the streetwise stuff, and you will start in that area. So that turns in your starting point. But I think that's about the last time that they. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
But also, it'll determine options for dialogue, mission options, and the flavor for the rest of the game.
That's remarkable. So you're gonna have that as your backstory throughout, and. But other than that, I don't think they do a lot of trying to push you down any one particular path. And after that, I think it's really you open up your skill set however you want and however you like to play.
Obviously, there's a critical path story that you're going to be, picking away at as you play the game. part of it's going to be on rails. CD Projekt has a story to tell. You're a part of that.
Yeah.
But they really want to embrace freedom as much as they can.
So when I'm making my character in Cyberpunk 2077, and I'm already thinking about this, why would I ever be like the Mauler, the big brute who wields an axe? I can get that in any game. I want to be hacker guy. I want to be security expert. I want to be the stuff that's unique to the cyberpunk world. I don't want to be a shooter. I can shoot in any game I want. I don't want to be an axe wielding guy. That to me, there's no fun in that. That'll be my second playthrough or my third playthrough. I want to be hacker guy. I want to be security guy. That is way more interesting because there's so few games that have done that well.
I'm guessing people will lean in that direction. I think CD Projekt's given you any flavor you want. If you play first person shooters, they want you to feel comfortable in that space. And as these previews point out, it does play like a typical first person game. You're going to have all sorts of powers you're putting on top of it, but you're ducking behind cover. You can use a lot of stealth. You can sneak up behind enemies and choke them out or whatever. The gameplay is not revolutionary. It's not a whole new thing. It's going to feel pretty comfortable if you've played first-person shooter games before.
There's a thing called brain dances, and I kind of get it, but maybe you can help explain what brain dances are because it's a not trivial part of how they tell the story of the world.
Yeah, so it is the prevailing form of entertainment in Night City, or I guess this whole fictional world, right? It's a version of virtual reality, but what you end up doing is sensing someone else's memories and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the influencers of this world are people you follow their real, actual memories and experiences, and if they're compelling, people latch onto these influencers. This is also, like how nightlife is handled is more so than in the real world, right? Like people,
you just
stay this way.
you stay in your studio and you just experience the lives of others through these brain dances.
Yeah, and brain dances can be edited, they're tweaked sometimes to further accentuate certain experiences.
Well, it's just like Facebook, where everybody always posts the great things that are happening in their life and the exciting things that are happening, and nobody posts the mundane things and the bad things, and
yeah. So that is brain dances, and that's just think about that. Just when you're thinking about Night City, going out into that for the first time, just all the stuff around you that you can see. But there's a whole nother layer if you go talk to someone and they invite you in, like, hey, do you want to check out this brain dance or whatever? That's a whole new narrative thread potentially opening up, more content opening up that you can't see with your eyes just walking around the world.
The graphics, Reiner, we've gotten solid gameplay time, and your people have gotten gameplay time as well, directly hands-on. The graphics in this game are really, really good.
Yeah. It's going to be pushing hardware to the limit. PCs, consoles. It's going to be coming to PS5 and Xbox Series X eventually. Mm-hmm. I can't wait to see what it ends up looking like on there, but I cannot wait to play it now. I'll probably play it on my Xbox One X if I had to guess.
Yeah, well, you will.
Just out of the gates.
Yeah, right. And why wouldn't you? Right.
Yeah, unless well, they say it's coming out in January and the consoles come out in November. No, I mean I have to put in 100 hours before that. This is the game of the year.
Who's doing the review?
Oh, we don't know yet. Yeah.
Really?
I think.
Okay.
Oh, actually, I just assigned it to myself.
Oh, how funny! Really, you don't say. That's the kind of editorial privilege that made all that backstabbing to the top worth it. I love it.
But when I said game of the year, I mean it's the biggest event of the year is games. We don't know if it's game of the year yet. Like we still have to put it through its paces. Last of Us Part 2 holds that honor right now. Like that's going to be a tough game to beat.
For the moment, yes. I believe it'll be Cyberpunk 2077 in a landslide when everything is said and done, but we'll find out. Where I'm going based just on hope and dreams right now and what little we've seen so far. Last thing that I'll mention about Cyberpunk 2077, again, your staff spent 12 combined hours with the game. Replayability looks incredibly high, and anybody who played Witcher 3 understands that it's going to be so much content in this world that you will be able to play this thing through multiple times and, rarely do the same thing twice.
Yeah, just from the backstories alone, you're going to want to play it 3 times, right? To see how those unfold.
Yeah.
And then you put all the variations on top of that. Yeah, it just sounds like a ridiculous. It just sounds fake. The amount of content, like I just can't believe how much is here.
Yeah.
Nobody knows how long the core game is yet. It's implied it's going to be long. CD Projekt has said it's long.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't know how that's going to stack up to the other RPGs of this ilk, right? Like, I think everybody's kind of looking at The Witcher or Skyrim over 100 hours.
Yeah.
Can that be obtained in a Cyberpunk setting with a huge cityscape and stuff like that, or do they got to scale it back a little? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see.
All right, Cyberpunk 2077. You can read more about it at GameInformer.com and in the forthcoming physical version of Game Informer magazine. Reiner, when we come back, I want to talk about a pretty decided change to Call of Duty Warzone, as it now supports 200 players. Is more always better? We'll touch on that when we come back to Video Games Weekly on The Fan. Welcome to the second segment of Video Games Weekly. We just broke down a lot of the hands-on time that Game Informer spent with Cyberpunk 2077. I am Paul Charchian. My co-host is Reiner. We now turn towards probably the most popular franchise going right now before Cyberpunk 2077 comes out, and that's Call of Duty, and specifically Call of Duty Warzone. Yesterday, was it early this morning? They upped the player count to 200. So, Reiner, as I mentioned going into the break, is more always better?
I mean, I think so when it comes to reinventing a game and giving it new life and taking shots, like we're just starting to go into this now. We don't know if it's better than 100 player or 150 player, but you just have to admire what Activision has done in just keeping this game alive and giving players new experiences that you didn't anticipate, right? Like, I don't think, Fortnite's 100 players. That's pretty much locked and loaded most of the time. Going in here now with 200 people on the battlefield at once, 50 teams battling out, it's quads. So it's 50 teams battling it to be the last man standing or last person standing. I think is so cool. I can't wait to jump into it myself and just see what kind of madness is there. Obviously, it's not going to feel good when you place like 197th out of 200.
Okay, but wait, is it a team ranking?
Yeah, it'd be you place
so
50th
I assume
or
you
whatever.
play 50th, right? So
yeah, that won't feel good. But the game was great to begin with, and I think this is a really compelling way to bring people back in for this new 4th season.
You mentioned I think one of the great things that's come out of these free-to-play Battle Royale games has been the ongoing seasonal content that they keep putting out that keeps these games incredibly fresh. They never feel stale because they keep putting out massive new content and keep innovating, and it's all brilliant. I mean, and Fortnite I think did it first and best, but just why leave? Once you know how Call of Duty Warzone leaves, and they're going to keep giving me a funnel of new and exciting content that drops every 6-8 weeks. Why leave?
Yeah, it becomes kind of your lifeline in gaming. Like, you want to unlock everything on the battle pass. You want to get all the costumes and all that stuff. Rank up. Be a part of a team that plays it religiously,
regularly,
right?
Yeah, right.
I've done that with Overwatch. I have a team that we play pretty much every night. Now we're playing Rocket League. There's just a brilliance to this repetition, right? Like these games, it's like playing a sport. Like, you just want to just keep going back in. You don't care if you're on the same map for the 1,000th time. It's still just as fun as the first time you ever played it. And even more so because you're better at it. You understand it more. These games, they could be played forever, a lot of them. And that might create some trouble down the road, right? Like, people just, maybe people just play free-to-play games and no longer buy other games, but it seems like gamers, people that are buy a console are playing a lot of stuff. But, for a while every night I'd play Overwatch. That was, a good hour or two of my night was always Overwatch.
So I think that Warzone, this will probably be very popular in Warzone. We'll find out. And it's hard to go backwards, right? I don't, once you've got your quads, your 4-person team, I don't think we're going to see a scenario where Call of Duty Warzone decides, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we should just go back to 100.
It depends if people like it or not, right? Like if they're like, go back, this isn't working.
Yeah, maybe.
They might just turn it off like, oh, that was a fun
Yeah.
event. We tried. But
So
you're probably right. I think they might, this might be the future moving forward. Maybe it only gets bigger from here. Larger war zones, more players. We'll see.
Ubisoft is going to get into the battle royale space with a brand new game they just announced this week called Hyperspace. We don't know very much about it, except it is a battle royale game. It's being developed by their Ubisoft Montreal team. These are the people who did Rainbow Six and Assassin's Creed, and it's coming very soon. It's coming next week, July 2nd. At least it was new to me. New news to me. I don't know, maybe you knew about it beforehand, because sometimes you catch a lot of these things earlier than I do. But I'm just wondering how much. The battle royale space is extremely popular, and Ubisoft does most things very well, but it's a very crowded space, and they are now pretty late to the show. What are your thoughts on Hyperspace?
Well, I don't like the name
Okay.
right out of the gates.
All right.
I guess you think about Fortnite. It's like, what is that? And now it's like the biggest game of all time, or one of the biggest games of all time, and it's it has its own identity, kind of like a Google, right?
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think the marketplace has a lot of options already that are well established from the biggest companies out there. Ubisoft's huge. They are not known for competitive games of this ilk.
Mm-hmm.
So I think definitely out of the gates, that makes you kind of question, do they have the chops to hold their own? EA is getting into the arena now, not Battle Royale, but they're going after kind of the hero shooters with like Overwatch and stuff like that with Rocket Arena. That was recently announced at their EA Play event. And it just makes sense for these publishers to try these free-to-play games and see if they can, latch onto the wave, the craze right now that people can't seem to get enough of.
Yeah. You got to find some way to innovate, right? It's got to be different somehow. And I don't know what to do about that. I mean, how do you make this thing stand? How do you make a battle royale game stand out right now?
And 200 players.
Well, yeah, right. They took that's gone, so they can't do that anymore. So there's got to be a way to do that somehow. And one of the things I think they could do is to give it more meaningful customization which is hard from a balance standpoint. But if I could meaningfully customize my character more than just cosmetically, not necessarily have to buy it, I think that would help. What do you think?
Yeah, being able to, like, if you play Fortnite, you have every character imaginable that you could play as now. There's Aquaman, Deadpool. It's gone from being like a fictional universe to just being a celebration of all things pop culture, which is kind of cool. But I think you're right. Like, maybe giving you a little bit more ownership over how you tweak things. Call of Duty has a little with the loadouts and some character design, but not much. One thing I would like to see in Battle Royale is somehow sewing in story or missions that carry over.
Oh yeah, a narrative.
Some kind of RPG elements that give me reason to be in that world other than just the competition. Obviously, the competition is king, but it'd be nice to have other things that kind of pull you along.
Yeah, that makes sense. Leaked documents show that Microsoft is already working on a second, cheaper Xbox Series X called the Series S, which has always been, their second wave console has been signified by the S, which I think at one point meant slim, and maybe this would be slimmer too. It sounds like this Xbox Series S would be for people that don't need 4K gaming. If you don't, if all you need is standard high def, just high def gaming, not 4K gaming, you could buy this less expensive console, which is powerful enough to run high def, but not powerful enough to run 4K, if I understand this correctly.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's all rumors right now, reports. We don't know exactly if this thing's gonna get announced in the coming days, or if it's something that they're planning for years down the road. We'll just have to wait and see. Why they would pick a letter that it sounds like X and S, like,
SX, yeah, great point. Great point.
You already have a console that people are confused by the name to a degree.
Yes.
With Xbox One X and Xbox Series X, and now you're adding in an S on top of that. I don't know what to say about that. It's just like, really? That's the one letter you had to go with?
Yeah.
But I do think, we're at a point now. Microsoft has said that the brand is going to be called for the new system is called Xbox, right?
Yeah.
Series X is going to be one of those models. We thought another might be like some kind of cloud device or something like that. But this sounds like it might be, as you're saying, if these reports are to be believed, something a little less, like between like a PS4 and a PS4 Pro, right? Like, or the Xbox One X and the Xbox One.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, and this is from a leaked document, which looks pretty legitimate. And so this is, to me, has a little bit more veracity to it than just a source tells me.
Yeah. We'll have to wait and see.
Not that the document can't be faked, but, I think it feels pretty legitimate. They're saying it's going to launch the same day as the Series X. So, we know that the PS5 has got two different versions that are basically distinguished, as far as we know, only by a disc player. The Series X may have two different versions at launch that are distinguished by the power that it has and its ability to work 4K, and that would give you two price points for the Series X.
Yeah, and less RAM, less powerful GPU, no disk drive.
Maybe.
I don't know what that. Maybe no disk drive.
Maybe. Yeah.
It could be like Sony's. We'll have to see what they end up going with. But I think it's good for consumers to have options, to have price points. You see that with the phones. Apple does a pretty good job. I mean, they're outrageously expensive, but
yes,
giving you different entry points is a good thing, I think.
For Microsoft in the Series X right now, Sony is still riding a pretty big wave of interest coming out of the big event they had a couple of weeks ago, in which they finally showed the physical appearance of it, and they showed some gameplay and trailers and stuff. Do we have something like that more coming from Xbox, or are we close to done with the announcements for Xbox, do you think?
We will be having a first-party showcase at some point. Rumors are, or reports again, in July.
Okay.
So this month, it's sounding like toward the end of the month, we'll have to wait and see where it ends up being, if these rumors are to be believed. But you got to assume Halo Infinite, the next entry in Master Chief's journey, will be a part of this showcase if it happens.
For sure. Halo Infinite, they haven't talked enough about it, and that's their biggest system seller. I mean, at least from an exclusive standpoint, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Halo is their AAA
launch
big first-party release.
Yeah.
Like Nintendo has Mario. That is their game, and it's great they're launching with it. Remember the old Xbox, the first one launched with Halo. That was the game.
Yep.
And
what I will always remember about that original Xbox Halo launch was this is the game that put our current first-person controller, like how we work the thumbsticks. This is the game that put it on the map. And because before that, you were using the thumbsticks, totally differently. If you go back to like the PS2 era games, the thumbsticks, like if you go back and play SOCOM on the PS2, the thumbsticks were not the way they are now, not in the first person, not the way we accept them to be now. Halo was the first big title that had the thumbsticks working that way, and people dinged it in their reviews for having that controller. Like, I don't understand this control scheme, and it took me the whole game to get through it, and I finally got, by the time I got done, I understood the control scheme, and it practically ruined the game for me. 9.2, whatever. Yeah.
We've come a long way.
We have come a long way. And the importance of Halo can't be, and the couch co-op that launched with Halo, the original Halo. Oh, that was epic.
Huge. Yeah. The multiplayer, all of it. Yeah. That was the complete package. It was definitely one of the best launch titles you could ask for, especially for a new brand like Xbox coming on the market.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really did. It sort of set up Xbox as the first place to go for great shooters through its whole lifetime. Yep. I mean, I think they largely won. They largely won in the Xbox 360 era because they had Call of Duty. That's where you went to go for shooters. They had a better controller, and they had all the advantages that they had with their partnership of Call of Duty then.
And now it doesn't matter because now everything's cross-play. Hopefully, hopefully everybody can play with each other.
That's right. Let's take a break, Reiner. When we come back, I want to talk about a variety of things, including a new Iron Man game. We've got a new music game called Fuser that I'm very interested in, and a variety of other topics for the final segment of the show. It's Video Games Weekly with Paul Charchian and Reiner. Back in moments. Final segment of Video Games Weekly. Paul Charchian and Reiner with you. Reiner, a couple of things I want to hit on between now and the remainder of the show, which now is just the segment. Drop Mix was a really, really fun game that nobody played. It was done by Harmonix. Those are the people that did the brilliant Rock Band games. And they've got so many good chops. And they did Rocksmith as well, as I recall, too, right? Didn't Harmonix do Rocksmith? I think so. I should know.
No, that was Ubisoft.
You're right. That was Ubisoft. Thank you. So Drop Mix was a great game, but you had to buy. The premise on Drop Mix was you bought this this long plastic board, and you would buy cards that had music beats on the card from famous songs. So you'd get like a Lady Gaga song, and you'd get a card that's got the bass beat or the drum beat or the vocal beat. And then you would be able to just drop different cards onto this board. And it somehow, just through magic, would end up taking any genre of song, any parts of the song, and then mix it together and make it sound super cool. And you're like this wizard DJ. That was what Drop Mix was.
Yep.
And so you had to buy a physical board. Then you also had to buy the cards. And then also it didn't have a speaker in it. So you had to use like your phone as a speaker. And it was kind of wonky, but the premise was also kind of brilliant. Now Harmonix is making a new game that is drop mix without any of the hardware, and it's all built just right into your screen. Tell people about Fuser, the new game by Harmonix.
Yeah, so Fuser is, they're back with another music game, which is hard to believe, right? Like it seems like that genre has been gone for a decade, and yet here we are again. They keep delivering ideas that are compelling and interesting and work in ways you wouldn't expect, right?
Yeah.
So Fuser is, like you said, like Drop Mix. It's music mixing, but you're doing it to a festival music scene. Where Drop Mix, you're just doing it by yourself on a board. Mm-hmm. This is, you have a huge crowd in front of you, and you're picking different songs from the top, dropping them down on the downbeat to create smooth transitions. And you also get to create your own riffs at certain points with either synth or drums. Mm-hmm. It just sounds fascinating. And it's, again, just a cool idea. This company keeps focusing on music, and I love that, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's a bad idea. The music genre is gone. But they keep, obviously, they're successful, right? They keep coming back to it and trying to reinvent it and find ways to bring it to us in different ways.
It's coming in the fall. It looks really fun. I've watched the videos for Fuser, and like Drop Mix, as you're just dropping these, the bass track from Fatboy Slim onto some Commodore's vocals, onto, like a Led Zeppelin guitar riff, although I don't think any of those bands might necessarily be in this game. But it all sounds good. And it's amazing that it sounds so great. And you really do, when you're doing it and you're like, this is never going to work. I'm going to put this beat down. And it does. And you're like, wow, that's super cool. So there's a little bit of magic that was in Drop Mix that I think they're going to get into Fuser. It's coming for all the big consoles and coming for PC as well. I'm excited to see how it ends up looking. And I won't have to buy a bunch of cards for it, which I did buy a bunch of Drop Mix cards, by the way.
Yeah, and tracks for this at launch include 50 Cent, In the Club, you got The Clash, Coldplay, Fatboy Slim, as you mentioned, Imagine Dragons, the Jonas Brothers, Lady Gaga. There's a ton on here, right?
Yeah.
And there will be more coming down the road if it's successful.
We follow VR a little bit more closely than I think a lot of shows do because we're both big fans. A couple of items from the world of VR. There's a pretty sizable game coming for PlayStation VR and exclusively to PlayStation VR. It's this new Iron Man game. I've seen it advertised a bunch, but I don't have a PlayStation VR. I've just got regular PC VR. So I don't know much about it. What can you tell us about Iron Man VR coming this Friday?
Yeah, Iron Man VR, it's a new story. It's not connected to the MCU. It's a standalone thing. And this brings you into the mask of Iron Man. If you've watched the Iron Man movies or Avengers, anything like that, they have those cool clips where you see the HUD on Robert Downey Jr.'s face, right? Mm-hmm. You get to experience that from his perspective. You get to upgrade Iron Man's armor, fly around in first person with him, shooting off all the different weapons, having different interactions in the air. Yeah. And it's not just all about combat. You could stop in front of a ship, maybe part of it's damaged, and pull the wing down.
Cool.
Different things like that that you can do. You're going against a villain named Ghost, who has a lot of tech very similar to yours. But this is when you think about a superhero game, a superhero you'd want to get into the suit of and experience that from first person.
Mm-hmm.
Iron Man's got to be at the top, just given that HUD, right? Just seeing that world through that. It's not
absolutely.
It's not just he's wearing lenses, right? Like, or, like you're not wearing just a cowl or, a mask. This gives you all this data that you want to experience, and you're going to be able to do that through PlayStation VR. It's only available on PlayStation VR. Now, that's this Friday.
Yeah, that's this Friday. Now, it may very well be turned out to be a timed exclusive. That first Batman game that was was exclusive to PlayStation VR eventually came to everything. So maybe later on we'll all be able to play Iron Man VR, but for right now it's on Sony only.
Yeah, I think it's published by Sony, but again, we've seen Sony stuff on PC now.
True.
So
yeah, who knows? We should mention this about VR as well. Facebook yesterday, and Oculus, really Oculus, their company, they revealed a prototype VR headset, and I use the term headset very loosely here, Reiner, that is the size and appearance of sunglasses. You and I have talked before that when you get to a point where these things are just like wearing sunglasses, that's when VR becomes something everybody owns. And maybe we're getting closer to that with this prototype. And I think, the reason I bring it up is, right now we're basically strapping small PCs to our face.
Yes, we are.
When we can get to a point that all we have to do is put on some sunglasses to have a VR experience, everything changes, baby. I think VR goes through the roof. What do you think?
Oh, that's the future. That's what we want, right? Like, just put on the shades, maybe some gloves, for haptic feedback, and you're good to go. You're playing. No tether, anything like that. If they can achieve that kind of technology, I don't know when it's going to happen, but that's when VR will truly arrive. Like, VR's had a pretty good run right now, right? Like, we were wondering if it was going to crater right out of the gates. It seemed pretty slow.
Yeah, it was
expensive. Developers stuck with it. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And developers, not just for games, but also in tech. We have so many different options, and they're pushing the medium forward, right? They're innovating at a rapid pace. And yeah, the end game is just those sunglasses, just putting something on, and it's light, comfortable, doesn't look crazy.
Yeah.
You can easily take them on and off. That's the future we want.
Yeah, for sure. It'd be very exciting if we can get to sunglasses level of VR headset. Everything changes. That would be fantastic. Just a couple of minutes left here, Reiner. You and I both loved Disco Elysium. I think the best adventure game of the last decade, certainly this generation of console. Fantastic game, and it's not out on console yet. It's PC only now, but their console version's coming, and we'll be talking about Disco Elysium again when they do come out. But a pretty surprising development this week, considering that Disco Elysium is still kind of a niche PC adventure game. The fact that there's a TV show in the works based on Disco Elysium.
Yeah, who would have thought that TV would be the place where maybe video games expand from what they are? Like, everybody thought it was going to be movies. There'd be like a Metroid movie, a Zelda movie. That's not happening.
Yeah.
Anytime soon. Video games have had a pretty bad run on the silver screen. But now you have like The Witcher that did pretty well for Netflix. And you're starting to see all these other shows start to pop up. You're going to have The Last of Us on HBO. Now Disco Elysium is coming. And that's such a fascinating world, and I think it's going to work pretty well.
Tell people about that world.
Setting. In terms of the setting, I think it's something that, I don't know, dystopian. I don't know the best way to describe it, Church, but it is very unique in its setup, and yeah, I think it'll work. And it's not coming anytime soon, though. They're saying maybe 2021, maybe 2022.
Yeah, it's a ways out, but Variety is reporting this. Variety is, I think, a very good news source, and a production company called DJ2 Entertainment is working on it. I don't know enough about that industry to know what they are all about, but Disco Elysium is set in a bleak, like, communist-era Eastern European city, and you play as a relatively unlikable, drunken, amnesiac detective. Disco Elysium is a really good adventure game for anybody that's been longing to play an adventure game, but hasn't felt like there have been any good ones since Monkey Island. We highly recommend it. Thank you for listening to Video Games Weekly. If you miss any part of the show, check out the podcast, available at kfan.com, fan on demand, also available on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Bye-bye, everybody. Talk to you next week.